Welcome everyone. This is Trey Jadlow. I'm here with my friend G. Whistler. We met recently, and we've been trying to do a hangout and having problems hooking up. So we just now tried once again and got it to work. I've not met you before. We talked very briefly before we started this, G. But I was wondering if you could tell me just a little bit about yourself. I noticed you have an accent. Are you from the UK?
Yes, I'm from Britain, and very simply, I won't go into huge detail. My position is simply atheist. I suspect is the easiest way of putting it.
Sure.
I don't believe. I hold the position that atheism it means that you don't believe. No, that's not right. Is it? The standard dictionary definition. I don't believe that gods exist, as opposed to I believe no gods exist, which some people I've noticed think is what atheism means. I simply don't believe in the existence of gods.
Right. You're not making a dogmatic assertion. You're just saying you don't see any evidence for such a thing, so it's not viable for you to hold to that.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, nothing complicated. Just I simply don't believe.
Sure. No, that's fine. I appreciate that. But you do realize, though, that everybody has a burden to justify their beliefs. So let's say, for example, somebody says, well, I'm an atheist, and I don't make any assertions. All I'm saying is that I just don't hold to the existence of God. But you are making a claim about existence and about reality. So you do realize that you still have a burden of proof for your perspective. Do you realize that?
I see what you're saying, but I don't think I really agree with that. What I was trying to say with respect to atheism is that I don't have a belief, and I think that definition of atheism gets lost.
Yeah, but I'm not sure what you mean by belief, because we all have belief. None of us knows anything for certain.
Right.
So,
well, I suppose that there are beliefs capital B and there's beliefs small b. For instance, I believe that the sun will shine tomorrow, but that's not. I don't hold that as a belief that guides my life. It's not something I read in like a Bible. I don't have a text that tells me that, and I don't hold. It's not a dogma for me. I simply believe that that's what's going to happen. I mean, we are temporal beings. We don't know everything. We're not omniscient. Or omniscient, whatever you pronounce it. So we don't know. We don't know what's around the corner. We have to act on whatever knowledge we have to make the decisions about what we're going to be doing in the future, whether that's days from now, years from now, or in the next hour.
Okay. Well, so from your perspective, would it be important to have a rational justification for why you do the things that you do?
I suppose so, yes.
Okay. So from your perspective, is it important to exist?
I'm not sure I understand that. I mean, I exist. I don't think about it really beyond that.
Well, it seems to me that you live every moment of your life trying to preserve yourself and trying to save the phenomena of existence. That's why you do science, isn't it?
Well, not to be pedantic, I'm not a scientist, so I can't speak as to why anyone would do science. I would assume because they want to understand how things work.
Right.
But I don't think about existence in that way. I simply exist. I exist.
Okay, so
we all think about things we'll all go through phases where we look at things on a deeper level, but I don't generally live my life thinking in that way. So I'm not sure how I can answer that question.
Well, hold on just a minute. I'm trying to people that were alive on the thing here. Okay, so yeah, but you do every moment of your life. You're seeking salvation. You're trying to know things. You're trying to advance humanity so that we can live longer and live more prosperous and happy lives, don't you?
Why did you say seeking salvation?
Well, when I say seeking salvation, I mean not in a sense of you're seeking eternal salvation of your soul. You may not believe in a soul, but I am saying that you're seeking salvation in some sense. In other words, you're trying to save your life for the next moment, save the generation, save the planet, save existence as far as you can. The reason you don't believe in eternal salvation like I do, because you give up. You don't think it's possible. But you do want to seek salvation at some level. Would you not agree with that?
I don't know. I mean, I suppose that some people put forward the argument that humans are driven to leave something to posterity. To have children, for instance, not simply to continue the species, but more to further their own, I suppose, legacy, or even, I suppose, a dynasty or something, if you see what I mean. I mean, I don't have kids. I have no particular desire to. But I suppose, well, I mean, I just don't have that. I'm not interested.
Atheists don't care for children. That's why they get the Darwin Award. They always go extinct.
Well, I can't let you say that. I think plenty of atheists care for and have children.
Not generally. They're not the demographic that really likes to have children. In fact, I know very few of them on the internet that have children or want children, which is ironic. They don't have the foresight to see that they're going to go extinct. Maybe
not. I mean, if we go extinct, we go extinct. I mean, I don't. If we were wiped out tomorrow by an asteroid, that would simply be the way of things. That would just be what happens. I wouldn't want that to happen,
right?
Because I would like to. I enjoy existing, but I don't think about if I stop existing, I stop existing. I don't aspire to live forever. As far as saving the planet, I think that's a worthy goal, because we know that there will be future generations, and I think it just makes sense.
Right.
It's good housekeeping. Let's put it that way.
Because existence is special, right?
Well, not really. We define it as special. It's not intrinsic. I don't think it's intrinsically special.
You can't imagine how many times I've had this conversation.
Well,
so it's special, but then it's not special.
Well, it's special to me, and it's special to other people.
Why? If it's not objectively special, why is it special to you? How do you explain that?
It's just subjective. It's simply as a subjective thing. We humans, I think, make their own purpose, ascribe their own value to things. It's the same.
Okay. So was Hitler's view better than yours?
Sorry?
Was Hitler's view better than yours?
Hitler's view
on existence?
Well, if you mean
he made his values. I mean, are they better than yours?
Are his values better than mine? No, I don't think they are.
Why?
Because I think his views are counterproductive to the betterment of society. I think killing 6 million Jews is not, to put it objectively and rather coldly, I think it's counterproductive. I don't think it increases. I don't think it's for the greater good. I think that it increases suffering in the world. Let's put it that way.
Okay, well, I love that word you use, objective. So existence.
Well, I'm trying to answer that. Well, I mean objective in respect to your question, because I want to answer that question objectively without undue emotion, because obviously if you're talking about the deaths of 6 million people, it's very easy to, and rightly so, to view that subjectively. It's a horrible thing that happened, and I don't think it was right.
Okay. Well, so do you think other people should hold to the view that you hold to on that?
I don't know what should. I would hope that they would reason to the same conclusion. I would hope that people's morality, people's morals, when they consider what's right or wrong about a situation such as that they would also see that it was the wrong thing to do and that he was misguided.
Okay, so your view is better than his.
Yes, I think so.
Okay, how do you measure that? Is it an objective, or are you just emoting?
I would say morals are subjective, if that's what you mean. I think they're subjective.
Okay, so it's not better than yours.
In my view, it is.
Okay, but really, for somebody who's an axe murderer, there's really nothing wrong with them. They're just different, right?
In a way, yes. In a way, I think in a way, yes. Whether there's something wrong with them is probably a very good point, because I don't think people generally pick up an axe to go around murdering people without there being something wrong with them.
So there is something wrong with them.
Well, I mean, they might have a mental health issue. They might be, I don't want to be unsubtle about these issues.
I thought you said they were just
mad.
I thought you were just said they were just different, but not.
Well, they're different in that they have something wrong with them. They have a deviant thinking.
So they're broken.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Okay, so then they're wrong.
Well, wrong is, wrong in the sense that there's something, physically even wrong with them. Not in a moral good or bad sense. But some people, I mean, that's a generalization. I can't comment on the psychology of axe murderers, because I don't follow these things.
Oh man,
I'm not an expert on serial killers and murderers. I don't generally believe that people commit acts of murder without there being something in their mind, to put it simply, wrong.
Okay, so you don't see the contradiction in what you're saying?
Well, I think you're trying to use the word wrong in a sense of in a moral sense, and I mean it in a sense of ill health.
Is it morally wrong to hatchet people to death?
Well, I would, on the face of it, say yes, it is wrong.
Okay,
I can't think of a reason why you would. Sorry, let me finish. I can't think of a reason why it would be good to hatchet people to death. I can't say that's good. If someone can provide a reason, then I'll hear it. But no, I don't think it's right. I don't think I would support that.
Okay, so it's not good to hatchet people to death. You can't think of a reason why it's good. Can you think of a reason why it's bad?
Well, for the same reason, I think Hitler's morality was wrong. It's just his is a more extreme example because of the number of people involved. I think it's you're forcing the murderer is forcing his will on someone else, taking away their agency in the strongest way possible by ending their life, and doing harm and causing suffering, not just to the victim, who will be dead more than likely, but to their family and their loved ones. That's an act that is going to cause no good that I can see. It's not going to make people happy. It's not going to enhance their quality of life or bring anything positive to the world. It seems to be an inherently negative thing to do.
Okay, so existence is special then, and we should care for existence because it's unkind not to.
Well, I'm not unkind, but I as I say, I think that, we each of us find that existence is in our own way special, but I don't think it's objectively special.
Okay, well, if it's not objectively special, then it's equal. The one who kills the person and the one who loves the person, there's nothing, they're just different, but there's not something wrong with them according to your perspective. But then you say they have a malady and you say there is something wrong with them, and you say it's wrong for them to hatchet. You're going back and forth here. I'm not sure I understand.
Well, I think the idea that I think morality, as I say, morality is a subjective thing. Some people may well think that it's right to go around murdering. Probably the murderer thinks what he's doing is right. So in his mind, it is right. But I would say, and I'm not an expert because I'm not a psychologist, that the person with an axe going around stabbing people has something wrong with them in terms of health. I think there's something that causes people to behave like that. It's they are sick. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
It would be ideal if our society could find people like that and help them, preferably before they, end other people's lives.
So you mean judge them to be sick?
Well, judge in the sense that we find out what's wrong with them.
So there's something wrong with them.
Well, I would think there must be. I don't.
Okay,
know. I'm not an expert.
So is that wrongness an objective wrongness, or is that just your opinion? Is that a fact, or is that opinion?
What, that they're
broken?
There's something wrong with them?
Yeah.
Well, it's my opinion.
Okay, so it's not a fact, though.
No.
Okay, so opinions, in your view, make up moral code. Like some people like vanilla and other people like chocolate. And since it's my opinion that vanilla is better than chocolate, therefore I think other people should eat vanilla. That's an opinion.
Yeah.
Now, a fact is somebody who you can say, for example, a person who is an axe murderer has a malady in their mind. They have a psychosis. There's something wrong with them, and they need fixing. And so if I'm going to say that, and we're going to gather together and say there's something wrong with this person, let's help them, that's a fact. There's something wrong with them objectively that leads them to do that. Would you agree with that? That's the difference between a fact and opinion for our conversation.
Well, it's an opinion. I say it's. I answered that. I think it's an opinion because I'm in no position to judge. I mean, it might be that there is a person out there who's murdering because they aren't. There isn't something wrong with them, and they just they like murdering people. But even that seems to me like the thinking of someone who has a dysfunction somewhere. I don't know. I mean, as I say, I'm not a psychologist, so we would have to find a way to do that. I mean, when people get arrested for these crimes, I imagine they are put before some kind of psychologist to evaluate whether they could even stand trial. And in some cases, if they are deemed mentally unhealthy, they won't be held criminally responsible, even though they physically carried out the crimes. Yeah. But as I say, I'm not a psychologist. I think we're drifting a little bit off the original topic.
Okay, what would you like to talk about?
Well, I think the original discussion was I had asked you for evidence.
Oh, for God. Okay.
Yeah, because your argument seemed a little circular. It seems to me that what you're saying is that because I exist, you exist, any one of us exists, that that process, life began because it was created by God. Is that what that's your position? I assume.
Well, the argument goes like this: if something exists now, something, somewhere, or somehow must exist in and of itself. It must have the attribute of self-existence, because we know that we are contingent. We know that we happen, and things that happen cannot happen themselves into existence before they are. So there must be somewhere, somehow, there must be something that has the attribute of self-existence. And my premise that I do for the argument, I don't know if you've seen my hangouts, are, number one, the basic reliability is sense perception. That means I just need enough sense perception to know that I, as an inquirer, exist. Nothing else matters. I don't care if nothing else exists but me. But I'm thinking about this. Two, that the law of non-contradiction holds, which is the foundation for all inquiry. If you cannot say that something is rationally coherent, then you can't have any inquiry other. So I've got to have an inquirer, and I've got to have rational coherence. And if I have those two presuppositions, or those foundations, that's a better word, then I know that things cannot happen before they are, because if something happens before it exists, you violate the law of non-contradiction. It is and it is not at the same time in the same relationship. So it's a logical argument, cosmological argument, if you will, that demonstrates that contingency cannot exist without the agency of self-existence.
Right, but it seems to me, I'm not a philosophical expert, so forgive me.
Me neither.
It ultimately seems as though you're saying that life was created by God. How we go from, I suppose, Adam and Eve to here, us here and now, I don't know. Let's forget that for the moment. But however life was created, you think that God created it. Do you believe in Adam and Eve?
Yes, I'm a Christian. I'm born again Christian. I'm a conservative, right. So I believe in the Bible as the Word of God.
Is there anything in the Bible you don't believe?
No, not properly interpreted. No, I hold to it.
So the first man was Adam, then created by God.
That's right.
Okay. Because you had asked me, I can't remember what it was specifically, but who created me, I think, and I had said, well, my parents created me, and then right. We go back, who created their parents, and we go back, through the fullness of time. I believe that's millions of years, billions of years, whatever it might be. I go with the general scientific opinion. I'm not an expert,
sure.
Which probably should be my catchphrase, but there you go. so that, life began as I guess, a chemical reaction. I think that's the sort of the prevailing wisdom, is that chemicals interacted. There was some catalyst, and we get cells. Cells get more complicated. We get multi-cell beings, and life, and it evolves over very long periods to us now. And the very end of that is my parents, their parents, and that's us now. So I don't think that the Adam and Eve story is literal, and I don't know how you can evidence God, is really what I'm asking. I don't see any evidence for God in that.
Okay, well, the existence of Adam is really a different subject, but let's talk. And I'm not making an argument for the existence of God making life. I'm making an argument for God making contingent matter. So those chemicals that you say were in the beginning, those are contingent. They're not self-existent.
Yeah,
so you got to justify those. That's where you need to start.
Well, natural processes, I believe.
Okay, but those processes, but the material of the natural process is contingent. Do you agree with that? It's dependent for its existence. It's not self-existent. It changes. Self-existence cannot change.
Well, those chemicals and what have you at the time would have come from the stuff of the cosmos, the Big Bang, which I think is, I'm happy to accept the Big Bang as the explanation.
So am I.
And that out of that, we get matter and energy, and billions of years later, the Earth forms from all the stuff around, including the ultimately the matter that gave rise to life. But okay. I don't see how it seems to me that you are putting forward a kind of circular argument that I exist, therefore God exists, because God created life. But I don't see any evidence.
That's not my argument at all. I'm not making a circular argument. It's a rational linear argument that begins again with the existence of contingency, and using the instrument of logic, reasoning back that since contingency cannot create itself before it exists, something with self-existence must have created it. There's no right. Particular Principi fallacy there whatsoever.
But I don't see how that has to be God, let alone the Christian God. I mean, you can make the same argument.
Okay, you don't like the term God, that's fine. Let's just talk about self-existence, that there is some being with self-existence that created all contingency.
Well, I don't accept that. I don't see any reason to accept that.
Okay, how do you justify the existence of contingency then?
How do I justify the existence of contingency? Define contingency again.
That which is dependent. I get in trouble. Sometimes I make up words. Sometimes when I say contingency, I mean contingent being. And I don't know.
You mean things that are contingent?
Yes.
As opposed to contingency as a thing in of itself.
Well, when I say contingency, I'm just referring to, we're talking about being. So when I say contingency, I'm talking about the category of dependent being. So contingent being is that which either could exist or could not exist. It's dependent. It's changing. It's not self-existent. Well, my lighting is not very good in here.
That's okay.
That's what I mean by contingency. It's that's
right.
That which is dependent for its existence. You're contingent on water. You're contingent on sunlight and oxygen in the air.
Yeah, that's what I had said. I depend on those things to survive. We all need, humans need food.
Right.
But I am a product of biological reproduction, and my parents' product of biological reproduction, and back we go.
Mm-hmm.
How the first cells were created, again, chemical processes, some catalyst. I don't know, lightning. The story is always that lightning struck the primordial soup. I don't know. It may have been some energy discharge.
Yeah, but that's not. My argument is not the beginning of life, though. Again, I'm talking about the soup itself. Where'd that come from?
Where did it come from? Well, as I say, matter. elements in the universe. The literally chemical periodic table elements coalescing into the planets and the Earth, and creating the environment as it was then, and it has since changed over time. Continents move and all that stuff. And at the time, there would have been chemicals that would ultimately have interacted in a way that gave rise to cellular life. I'm guessing that's the
okay, but you're not. Yeah, but you're not answering the question. I know you're not meaning to obfuscate, but you're not. That which changes is contingent by definition. So
we ultimately.
I'm sorry.
We ultimately go back to the Big Bang. Is where this is going, right? Surely, is how did everything start? Presumably, because.
Right, and the Big Bang is where we see the rise of contingency.
Right, I can't tell you what caused the Big Bang. I don't know, but I don't believe it was through what you would call God, I suppose.
Okay, well then tell me
whatever term is. I don't know. I couldn't tell you, but I don't believe that it was God.
Okay, so I give an argument and you don't rebut it, and you say that I'm wrong, but you don't give a rebuttal. Is that what you're doing?
No, I just don't. I don't believe that that's the case. I don't believe it. I can't explain how the Big Bang came to be, or what quote unquote caused it.
Okay, so you're conceding the argument by just not answering.
Well, if you want to put it that way, fair enough.
Okay.
I'm not. It doesn't matter to me. I simply don't believe that it was created by a being.
Okay.
Or an intelligence.
Okay, but you're appealing to your belief, and I gave you a rational, coherent argument, and you rejected that, and you resorted to fideistic belief without any justification.
Well, there's other reasons for not believing in God. I mean, we're not discussing. We're really talking about when I spoke to you, it was about the God you believe in, not God, not any God, because ultimately you believe in the God of the Bible.
So well, the God of the Bible begins with the God who created everything. That's why I start there. And right, so if
but why do you believe that? Why do you believe that? Is it just because of those logical positions that you?
Yes, it begins with that, of course. Because let me say this. I'm sorry.
Is logic really enough? Because it seems like you to use logic to infer and then believe that God exists, if that makes any sense, seems quite
yeah. Let me say that I'm different probably than most Christians contemporary today. Most of them say they believe in God because they just accept it because it's true or something like that. I'm not like that. I accept the existence of God because I think it's objectively true, and I think it can be tested, and you can put it to the test, and it will pass the test. If it's not true, then I don't want to hold to it. I'm not interested in following Christianity. I'm interested in following what's true.
Right, but the test is your logical principles, right?
No, they're your logical principles.
Well, logical principles.
You've conceded my two premises, right?
I suppose.
Logic and basic sense perception.
I'm happy with the log. Yeah, okay, but I don't agree with the conclusion that it was God.
Right, but you don't rebut it.
Well, I haven't got an alternative for you now.
Okay, fair enough.
But you have a whole worldview that comes from this premise, from the existence of this being. You have a whole worldview. You have a code of conduct, but you have a moral code that comes from this, don't you? As a Christian.
I do. So here I have this foundation that you concede is rational and coherent, and then I build a tree from that foundation.
I don't know about
you have no foundation at all. Nothing. You're just blind faith.
My foundation is the world I see around me. I mean, it's a I suppose you'd call it a materialistic worldview. I'm happy with that.
Yes, but you said you can't justify it. You conceded that.
I can't tell you how it was, how it came to be,
or even how it exists now.
Well, I don't know what you mean by that. How it exists now?
If you've conceded that it's contingent in its nature, contingency by definition depends upon that which gives it its being in order to be. In other words,
Right,
you're conceding that it's dependent, and yet you say that it's dependent on you won't go where it has to go, which
well,
says
no, I think I accept that life is defined by change. That life changes, we change, we evolve. I believe,
mhm.
small b, you know, but I don't think I can't remember what you just said actually. You're
I don't know either.
well, you said I couldn't justify things as things now. I can't remember what you said.
Well, you can't justify. You cannot justify the existence of contingent being.
Well,
You know, you admit,
yeah, but that's just another way of saying what I've already agreed is I can't explain how everything began, and I've
that's
agreed
right.
that I
And
can't
so,
explain that.
and I've given a rational argument that you have not rebutted, and so you reject mine, and then cling to blind faith that's irrational. In other words, you're saying, well, it just is by
Blind
itself,
faith.
even though it's changing. Yeah, you haven't given justification.
What is it that I've accepted as with blind faith?
That contingency can exist by itself without denying the law of non-contradiction.
I haven't. No, I don't think I've accepted that. I just simply don't have an explanation for the Big Bang. You agree that the Big Bang happened because you said so.
Yes.
Is that right? That's fair. Okay. So
yes.
we both agree that something happened,
right?
Which we call the Big Bang.
Which we call contingent being, right?
Well, I'm talking about the Big Bang.
Yes, but it's the happening of all contingency.
Right. Okay. I mean, we don't know what there was before then.
Well, we know that something was before, though, right?
I don't know.
You can't have ex nihilo nihil fit. Out of nothing, nothing comes. You can't have something. This is my big argument with Ozzy. He won't do it.
Well, yeah, well, he's a smart guy. I'm not. So the problem there is that you know, I wouldn't be able to tell you what nothing means, but there is.
Well, it's pretty simple. It's no thing. That's
well, yeah, but there's nothing, and then there's
then there's something nothing.
Well, yeah, I mean the word nothing is one of these words that we use to describe all sorts of things. You know, we could say an empty room has nothing in it, but there are obviously things in it because there are atoms.
Well, yeah, but we're speaking in a very specific terminology. What I'm talking about is absolute nothing. Now,
well, I don't know that there was absolutely nothing before the Big Bang.
There couldn't have been, because if there were, nothing would be right now, right?
Is that what the current science holds? Do you know? I don't know.
All I know is that you've given me you have conceded the premise of the law of non-contradiction. Something cannot be and not be at the same time in the same relationship. If the universe exploded out of nothing, you just violated the law of non-contradiction. Therefore, we don't know
that it exploded from nothing, and I mean nothing in the conventional sense that we understand it.
Because we have the premise of the law of non-contradiction. You've already conceded that.
But do you know? Let's see, because how can I put it? Before, do you have any scientific knowledge of anything of the state of existence before the Big Bang? I mean, because we don't know what was before it. We don't.
What do you mean by science?
Well, in terms of what do I mean? I suppose in the context, what do I mean? Let me how to put this. I mean, do you have any knowledge of physics? Are you scientifically schooled or anything like that? I don't know.
No. But all I'm saying is,
I don't either. I'm just curious.
Well, no. Here's the thing, G. The problem is that if science, what I think you mean by science, and what most people mean by science, is empirical science. But we cannot know things empirically in the past unless there was someone there to watch it. So you might call it historical science, but we don't know. Well, all we can do is extrapolate a guess. So we don't know.
So do you believe the theory of evolution explains things, or is the correct explanation? Or
well, obviously, I just said that I believe in atoms, so I don't believe in common descent, but I do believe in a small level adaptation and by means of natural selection. Yeah. That's a scientific fact. That's been observed. But I don't believe that we all came from one single cell organism. There's no science for that. We've never observed anything of evolving past the level of, say, family. But even
Well,
worse than that, is the fact that Darwinian evolution has no efficient cause. In other words, it has this valuing of existence without a valuer. And I don't think that it's implausible. I think it's silly. That's why I always laugh at it.
How do you know it doesn't have a cause?
Well, that's the whole point. That's the whole point of it. It's naturalistic. You know what naturalism is?
Define it for me.
Well, naturalism is nature is all there is. There is no creator. It's just things making together. And I don't know if you're familiar with Aristotelian causality, but Aristotle broke down causality into several categories, which is just, if you see my Hangouts, I repeat it a lot because it was so helpful for me when I learned this.
Right.
Aristotle, are you familiar with it?
I'm not, no.
Okay, so Aristotle broke down causality into several categories, and he said that he gives the analogy of a sculptor making a sculpture. And so he goes in and he decides he's going to make this statue, and he has this huge block of granite. And the granite itself would be the material cause. It's that out of which the final thing will be made. And then he has these things called a hammer and a chisel. Those are the instrumental causes. Those are the instruments that he uses to actually make the statue. And then he has the formal cause, which is the idea that he has, or the blueprint that he has of what he's going to make in the end. It's going to be a horse, right. It's going to be a match or whatever. Like that's the formal cause. And he has a final cause, which will be the reason for which he is making the statue. It may be a commission for the king or something like that. The final one is going to be the efficient cause, that which brings about the effect. That would be the sculptor himself. Darwinian evolution has no efficient cause. It only has instruments and material. And so we've got somebody like G. Whistler here who is seeking to talk to Trey Jadlow right now. He's personal. He is purposive, and he's purposive, and he's not accidental or unintentioned in himself. And so unintentionality cannot give rise to intentionality. When you say the goal of evolution is survival, I get, just like you were equivocating on morality, I get people equivocating on evolution, saying, "Oh, there's no goal there," but what the ultimate working toward is survival, and it just makes absolutely no sense.
Why does it make no sense? Why is that not a reason for evolution? A satisfactory reason?
Because you cannot have a goal without a goaler, and if the goal is survival, then it's a goal. It's intention. That is intention. But goals by definition are intentional.
But survival surely is a goal in and of itself.
That's right. And you can't have goals with Darwinian evolution. He would equivocate all the time.
I don't follow that.
Do you get excited when you find a new species?
Well, it's exciting because it's new knowledge.
Right. And when you find some way to, and when you find some way to preserve life or to make life longer, that's a good goal, right? That's an evolutionary goal.
What, you mean medically?
In your mind, the goal is survival. And there cannot be a goal if there's no goaler, and you are a contingent goaler, and you cannot have.
So you don't believe that the goal of survival is valid because there was no one to put that. There was nothing to put that goal into action. Is that what you're saying?
That's right. Yes. Yes. Right, you cannot have goal arising accidentally, because accident does not have the property of intentionality. You're violating the law of identity. You're saying something, what it is its opposite.
So there was you don't think there was any way that evolution could come into being then as a natural process?
I don't think evolution as a process can account for intentionality.
So you don't think that evolution can be a natural process. To you, it's illogical.
That's right.
Right. Okay. All right.
Let me see if I can remember the Darwin's on the origin of species by means of natural selection, or the preservation of favored races in a struggle for life. So the goal is preservation of favored races, those which survive in the struggle. Think about struggle. Those are people talking. Struggle for life.
Well, there's a little bit of artistic license there. A little bit
I don't think so.
license.
I think that's what
really?
What does struggle mean?
Well, yeah, but I mean, the struggle for life is emotive term. I mean, and plus Darwin existed a good century and a half ago. We've learned more about it then, I think. We have a
but it's still the same terminology.
Well, it may be, but I don't think
that's why Richard Dawkins has to say in the Selfish Gene, that everything looks like it's made with purposiveness, but don't believe it. It's not true.
So, do you think that humans will look any different in a million years from now?
No, not significantly. I mean, I don't know if I don't see how we could live another million years though, the way things are going. But no.
Well, that's another point. Do you think we descend? Do you think we have a common ancestor with apes and chimps?
No, remember, I believe in Adam. I'm a biblical literalist.
Yeah, I just was curious.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe we came from a common ancestor. I'm happy to accept the scientific view on that.
You're happy to live by your feelings too.
Well, I suppose in a way, yes. I mean, you said that I equivocated on morality, but I don't think that's equivocating. I think morality is subjective.
Yeah, but if it's subjective, then you have no basis on which to judge another. Do you realize that?
Well, I have my own basis, and if others agree with me, then we have a shared basis. That's how laws get made, isn't it?
Okay, but the problem is then all you're saying morality is the strong ruling the weak with their personal preferences.
I wouldn't say it was the strong. I would say it was the majority, and the majority doesn't have to be. I mean, that implies a sort of physical dominance, which I think that's a little mischaracterizing it. Really.
How so?
Because that implies a brute force element that
Well, how else did you say
strong
it?
are dominating the weak. No, because as a society, we can reason our morality. We can discuss and come to conclusions about what is right and what is wrong, and that will change over time. What is right and wrong now is probably not going to be the same 1,000 years from now. I mean, for instance, today we have computer technology where we can digitally copy files. People will pirate music and share it online. We all know that happens. 100 years ago, that technology wasn't there, so there would be no morality surrounding that.
Okay, let me make it clear. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go on. That's fine.
Okay, so let me make a distinction here. You may say that morality changes in a sense that we change the way that we do things. I concede that, but what I'm saying is what never changes, which always has been the very foundation for every moral code, and we learn more as we go along, is that existence is special. That's the moral foundation. For you, it's for me. It's every law that we make, that which promotes existence. And we deviate from that and we learn more and we come back to that, but we're always doing that. The difference between us, though, is I have a justification for the sanctity of existence. You have none. And that's why I say you equivocate.
What is define your justification for me?
Well, existence is special by definition because it is. In other words, we all know in our hearts, we all know we have this conscience written within us that we know that it's special to exist. And if contingent existence is special, then how much more that which is self-existence, which gives rise to contingent existence. It's just, we all know that axiomatically. You guys want to deny it when you're pressed, but when deep down, the way you live your life every day, you know that life is special, but you can't justify it.
I've agreed with that. I've agreed that. I've said to me, you're talking to me, I can't, we don't know what other people think, so we're having a conversation. I have said that I have agreed that life is special.
Yeah, but you haven't given a reason for it. You said that when you objectively test that, it's a lie.
No, I haven't said it's a lie. I said it's special. The reason for that, I don't think I did give a reason, so let me think of one. Because life is special because we're alive, I suppose. we don't like pain, so we don't like to be in situations, generally speaking, where we feel pain, and we have I suppose, an aversion to death to a certain degree. You know, no one wants to put themselves, generally speaking, in a position where they, you know, where they're going to die. Obviously, some people get a buzz out of dangerous things, but I think in general, we don't frivolously risk our lives, or don't do things we think are frivolous. We do things we enjoy, and we get a thrill out of it, and that's the thrill of being alive, I suppose. People like being alive because they are alive, and so life is special to them.
Yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's fine, go on.
Well, I'm just saying that basically you just gave me a just so story. This is the same story I always get. You say that life is special because we like it. Well, that's a circular argument. I'm not asking you to give a description of why you think that life is special. I want to know the reason why existence is so special to you when it's meaningless objectively.
I can't answer that without what you would call a just so story, because I don't think it is intrinsically.
That's right. It's another blind faith statement from you, right?
Well, no, it's not blind faith to say that I don't think life is. I don't know. I don't think that that's blind faith, because I don't see anything that gives life intrinsically, makes it intrinsically special. I don't think God does. If he's, you know,
so your conclusion drives your reasoning.
Well, my reasoning is just that I think that we ourselves define our own lives, and I think that people find ways to make life special for them. Some people don't, because they suffer from, you know, they might have a crappy life, and they might have mental health problems, you know, depression. People who suffer from depression aren't going to think life is very special. But I don't believe, as I don't believe in God, I don't believe that God created life and instilled existence with a special value in and of itself. I don't see any reason to accept that that's the case. And if it is the case, then some of the things that are reported in the Bible would be very troubling, because he seems to be quite happy to kill when it suits him and to take life away at the drop of a hat.
Yeah, but you're complaining against that belies the fact that you say that life is not holy. In other words, you have to assume his existence in order to complain about what he does.
Well, no, I argue against. I complain about it, if you like, on the terms that are set out in those stories. So when God, for instance, in the story where he kills the 42 children, teasing the prophet, life would have been special to those children. They would have enjoyed life, I'm assuming, and they may have had a crappy life, I don't know. But I imagine that in their eyes, their lives were worth having, and yet God snuffs them out. What message does that send? So it's things like that make me very skeptical. Okay,
well, gee, what you're saying is, though, that those young men were wicked, and they deserve judgment. The fact is that all of us. Oh no, that's what I'm saying, and I'm saying it's perfectly rational and justified. Are you a holy person?
I don't know what you mean by a holy person.
Do you have a standard that you live by that you are able to attain?
A standard.
Do you live the life that you think that you ought to live?
What, morally?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
So you don't fail morally from your own standard?
I haven't murdered anyone today, so that's pretty good.
You know, G, that we all do. We are all sinners, and none of us are holy. So
I don't believe in sin.
Okay, well, the amazing thing for me, from my perspective, G, is that not that the young boys, you know, taunting the prophet were killed, but that I am still alive, that anybody is still alive, because we all know that we're sinners. We all know that we're fail. You don't like the word sin, but we all know that we're morally weak, and that we do things that we're ashamed of.
Well, what makes you think I'm morally weak? Because by definition, I'm a sinner. So what sins have I committed? Or what morals, what are my moral failings?
Have you ever had a standard for yourself that you have not been able to keep? One.
You mean morally again?
Yeah.
I don't think I have.
You've never had to say I'm sorry?
No, I have, obviously. No, I shouldn't.
Have you ever told a lie?
Yes, I have told lies.
Okay. Have you ever looked on a woman to lust for her?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Have you ever been angry at somebody without justified reason that you were sorry for it later?
Well, that's a funny one, isn't it? I've been angry at people. I'll say yes for the sake of argument.
Okay. Have you ever cussed somebody out?
Yep.
Okay. So you're a sinner, right? I'm sorry, I don't want to use that word. You have failed your standard, which you know you should do. You know, you shouldn't be objectifying women. You shouldn't be hating other people. You shouldn't be
I didn't say
lying.
objectifying. You didn't ask me if I objectified women. That's not what you asked me.
To lust for a woman who is not yours is to make a tool of her. Have you ever viewed pornography?
Necessarily. No, I don't think that's necessarily true. I think objectification and simple biological lust are two different things.
Okay. Do you think that pornography is objectifying women using pornography?
It can be, yes.
Okay.
You said looking at someone who wasn't yours. Women are possessions then?
Well, they are in a covenant relationship where the woman gives herself to the husband and the husband gives himself to hers. Yes, they belong to each other.
So a male cannot be sexually attracted to a female that he is not married to without committing a sin.
If he lusts for her, yes, he's committed the same sin. It is adultery. It's not the same as adultery, but it's in your mind. You're still doing it, and you know that.
Well, how is it adultery if let's assume neither party are married? Is it still adultery?
Say it again. I'm sorry.
Well, you said it's committing adultery in your heart, lusting after. You know, how isn't adultery having an affair with someone who is married? If I had an affair with a married woman, that would be adultery. If she wasn't married, it would just be two people. Well,
I'm not saying it is adultery. I'm saying it's the same sin and the same classification as adultery. It's not, obviously it's not the same thing, but it's something that you should not do.
Well, then how do humans function then? Sexual attraction is intrinsic to the human experience.
I'm saying that you are. No, I'm not saying. I'm talking about fantasizing about women who are not yours in a way that they have not given you permission to do. You're objectifying them.
Well, lust is not. People will be sexually attracted to other people regardless of that person's permission, whether you're not.
I'm not referring to being attracted. I'm talking about fantasy.
Right. Okay.
So
I don't see how that's a sin, but I don't believe in sin. Why would God object to that then?
If in fact it were the same sin in a lesser degree, say rape, I'm not equating lusting for one for rape, but let's imagine that they're in the same class and one is just worse than the other. And let's imagine that standard from which it came is absolute perfection. Would it not be offensive to that standard to even see the lust?
What do you mean by absolute perfection? You mean not having sex at all?
If there's a moral standard, there must be a moral standard. In other words, it's moral perfection, which would be the being of God. And so to offend that would be highly offensive to the standard.
Right, but then God seems to not be very good at designing humans then.
Well, no. Do you know why we have sin in the world, according to Christianity?
It's to do with it's the Adam and Eve, isn't it?
That's right. So mankind put us into this position that we're in, and he was our father, and he was our representative, and we all are sinners as a result of his action.
Is that reasonable to you?
It's very reasonable because what it is do you believe in representative government? Where you elect an official who represents you before?
Well, it's a nice idea, but I would rather represent, not these days. I think representative government.
But I know that we have bad representatives these days, but I'm saying it's a valid form where you have somebody representing you, just like in a law court. You hire a lawyer to represent you, and depending on how that lawyer performs, you will be counted either innocent or guilty. Right. So
yeah, but that's. But the problem there, the problem with the Adam and Eve idea is that it's the sins of the father, isn't it? We are responsible still. Every human being born subsequently, from now until when they stop being born, whenever God decides Judgment Day happens, will be bearing the guilt of that sin, just as Eve did.
That's right.
That's right. So,
but Adam is a special case for us. He's our representative. So just like we have representatives to go for us for government, we have representatives who stand before us in law courts. When we choose our representatives, we want to choose someone who can best represent our perspective so that he can accurately represent us. Is that correct?
But we didn't. Well, yeah, that's correct. But we didn't choose Adam. We had no choice in this.
That's exactly right.
We are born after the fact.
That's exactly right. So that just shows our disapproval of God. When you choose a lawyer, when you choose a representative for government, have you ever been disappointed in your choice?
Of course.
Yes. Gosh, I know us. We said no new taxes. The next thing you know, we get a tax hike. And you're frustrated. You're thinking, I believed him and he lied to me, and you get upset. Well, God, when he chose a representative for you and for me, G, he chose the perfect representative, not one who would represent us in a way that would be faulty like we choose. So when Adam sinned, we all sinned because he represented you. He represented me.
What was Adam's sin?
Eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
No, that was Eve, though. Well, sure, I thought it was Eve. But you say both of them.
Well, Adam was over her in authority, and it's his job to look out for her, and he didn't.
So he was responsible, right? I see. But that seems a little. I mean, that's not really very reasonable, surely. She ate the fruit. He is responsible because God has decided.
Well, they're both responsible, but they're both responsible.
No, he didn't eat. He is not directly responsible for the act because he didn't do it. Right?
She gave the fruit to him, and he ate. Did he not?
Oh, he ate the fruit then?
Yes.
That's okay. So, right. But why did God create this situation in the first place? Surely all of this is God creating this whole situation.
Okay, well, now you're saying that God doesn't exist because he doesn't do things the way that I think he should.
Well, no, that's not what I said. I'm questioning God's wisdom, if you want to look at it that way. Because
that's
it doesn't make any sense to me that you would create a situation where you would essentially trip up the beings you've created in order to create sin as a necessary condition for a morality you want people to live by, and then to create Jesus to be a sacrifice to absolve men of their sins, of the sins of Adam and Eve, which everyone else didn't, including Jesus, didn't do. None of us ate the fruit of the tree of knowledge. Adam and Eve.
We did if he represented us accurately, right?
I didn't ask him to represent me, though.
Yes, but remember what I said. You choose representatives that don't represent you very well, right?
Well, no, I didn't choose them at all. They have been assigned to me according to.
That's exactly right. And God chose somebody infallibly who would represent you. You choose fallible representatives, right?
Well, that's not really the issue. I mean, yes, we've all elected people we don't like, but I'm talking about Adam and Eve. We did not choose Adam and Eve to be our representatives. We were not given the choice. We weren't even around them.
That's right, because we are fallible choices. That's because we make fallible choices. So God made a choice for us that would be a perfect representative for us.
Well, that doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Well, sure it does. Well, it makes sense to me perfectly, because I need somebody to represent me perfectly. Otherwise, because if I have somebody that represents me imperfectly, then justice is not served.
What justice is? What do you mean by justice in this situation?
That which corresponds to reality. In other words, if I'm accused of stealing a loaf of bread or something, I have to go to court. I need to have a representative that can accurately represent me. The problem is,
but you're directly involved in that incident. You may have stolen the loaf of bread, or someone had reason to think that you did. If you were accused of a crime that happened before you were born, let's say 100 years ago, I think we can safely say you weren't born 100 years ago. Would that be reasonable to you? Would that be just?
Well, yes. I don't have to be present for something to be guilty. You know that somebody can hire a hitman and fly off to the Bahamas, and that hitman kills, say, this guy's ex-wife, and he can be counted guilty even though he wasn't there. So yes, it is possible.
Presumably because he hired the hitman.
Right.
So he was involved. Whereas
he's culpable.
But if the person who had hired the hitman didn't exist at the time of the hit, and they were born 10 years later, you surely wouldn't think they were guilty.
Well, sure I would. If in fact the one who was guilty was a representative for the person who was called to be guilty.
Right, that doesn't really make much sense to me, I have to say.
Okay. Well,
were Adam and Eve innocent of knowledge of right and wrong before they ate the fruit?
They had a mutable righteousness. They did not have an earned righteousness because the time in the garden was probationary, and they failed. That's why we'll have a better state than Adam and Eve in heaven, because we will have the actual earned righteousness of Christ given to us. Adam and Eve failed in a probationary period.
So you used some terminology there. What is the source of that terminology? Is it in the Bible, earned righteousness? Is that from the Bible, that explanation?
It's an extrapolation from the biblical doctrine, just like the Trinity is not in the Bible, but the concepts are there.
Right. So that was decided by, that extrapolation was decided by theologians then, after the Bible was written, yeah?
Yes, just like all kinds of doctrines are, yes. They were codified. They're codified by theologians.
Why do you believe why do you believe their conclusion? It's not in the Bible. So why?
Sure it is, because the Bible, that's what the Bible teaches. If you read the Bible, you can see that. Just like the Trinity, if you read the Bible, you say that there's one God, and that one God manifests himself in three persons, and each one of those persons is distinct. You can't get away from that.
Right. Well, that may be the case for the Trinity. I was speaking about Adam and Eve knowing right from wrong.
Well, they did have a righteousness when he started, and it did fall from that, and it was a mutable righteousness. Do you agree with that?
Right. Well, I don't agree with it because I don't believe they.
No, I'm just saying.
Well, I can accept your explanation, but what I'm asking you is that explanation, those definitions were created by theologians who studied the Bible. Is that right?
They were codified by theologians, yes, and church councils.
These phrases, this explanation you give me, the immutable righteousness and such, is that to be found in the Bible?
That term, no. But the concept is there.
Where was the concept? And what part of the Bible is that in? Do you know?
Well, I know that Adam and Eve, they fell from sin, and that Christ in the New Testament lived a perfect, kept the whole law, and died as a perfect lamb sacrifice.
I was specifically asking about that explanation. What I'm saying is that explanation is a man-made explanation to explain something the Bible doesn't clearly set out. The Bible doesn't.
I never said that. I said it's very clear in the Bible, but
well, no, I know that's what I'm saying, and I want to know what. I'm just asking you if you know what passage that is. If you don't, that's fine. I'm just curious because
the Christ is the righteousness of God.
No, I'm a bit troubled by explanations. I mean, you're not the only Christian who uses such language, immutable righteousness and these sorts of phrases, and they don't seem to be derived from the Bible. They seem to be man-made, and it seems to be that it's very easy for people to explain the sorts of incongruities or things that seem incongruous to people like me, such as Adam and Eve and right and wrong, knowing right from wrong.
I'm not sure what I mean by incongruent. What's incongruent?
Well, it's incongruous to me because the reason I asked about Adam and Eve knowing right from wrong is if they didn't know if they didn't know that eating from the fruit, the tree of knowledge, was wrong, can they be held accountable for doing something that was wrong?
Because God told them, you may eat of all the tree of the knowledge of the garden.
But they don't know it was. Yeah, but they don't know it's wrong to disobey God. They don't know they don't know right and wrong. They have no morality in that respect. That's the incongruity I'm referring to, and your explanation depends on stuff that is extracurricular, shall we say? It's not in the Bible.
I'm not sure. I'm not following you. You said that Adam and Eve.
I asked you if Adam and Eve knew right from wrong, and you said about immutable righteousness. And
no, I said mutable. They had a
mutable righteousness. Okay, well. You use that expression, and I asked you where that came from, whether that came from the Bible or whether it's just something that theologians had.
It's a concept that they had, that there was an innocence about them, but they did not have. In other words, they're in a probationary period in the garden where God told them not to do something. Do you agree with that? And they failed.
Well, I agree that some of the story is that, but I don't know about a probationary period. I mean, how do we know that that was a probationary period?
Well,
That's what I'm
because they
asking.
were put in a garden and they were given a command and they failed the probation. You can't see that.
But they didn't know what they were doing was wrong.
Well, how did they
didn't know right
then
from
why
wrong?
did they
That's what
hide
the
from
knowledge
God? Why did they hide from God?
I have no idea. Well, because they'd eaten the knowledge, they'd eaten the fruit, and so they had gained knowledge. So
their eyes were open once they ate the fruit, and they knew that they were naked, right?
Well, they knew that they had been given knowledge of right from wrong. Isn't that part of what the fruit was supposed to impart?
Oh, maybe I see. Okay, maybe we're talking past each other. Yes, the knowledge of the. Okay, so what it means is that there's they have a knowledge of good and evil. They can discern things apart from God. In other words, they can make up their own morality and separate themselves from God for knowing right and wrong. Maybe we're talking past each other. I didn't understand what you're saying.
Well, maybe I don't know. All right, let's move on from Adam and Eve.
Okay. I've only got a few more minutes, G. I gotta get some chores done and do some stuff before this evening.
Okay. Well, I'm not really sure what else to ask. I was going to ask about whether you believe the ark. You believe the ark, Noah.
Sure, I do.
Why do you believe that? I mean, because you must have heard arguments that physically, that goes against science or what scientists believe.
Yeah, I've not seen those viable. I've not seen those viable arguments. But the thing is here's what I'm going to do, G. Here's where I'm going to get this. I'm going to trust in the general reliability of the Bible, particularly the New Testament. This is with I don't know if you saw my Hangout with Alex. I talked about this, but there's a guy named Sir William Ramsay, who's an archaeologist, and he was taught in school that the Book of Acts was written 100 years after it was purported to be written. And so he sought to go to Palestine and to do archaeological verification to demonstrate that the Bible was a forgery, that it was not true. And he said the easiest way to do that is to go and check out the archaeology, because there's no way somebody 100 years removed in that time could get the facts right and get the landmarks and all the stuff, that because Luke was very detailed. He was a physician, so he was very careful with the way he wrote things. So he went to demonstrate that the Bible is wrong. And he went through and spent many years studying these things. And I remember they said, oh, there's no constabulary position for this thing where the Bible says this in Acts. And he actually unearthed himself the verification for that. I think it was on one of the islands when Paul was on his fourth missionary journey. Right. And so when he finished it, he said that Luke is a historian of the highest stature. His writings, or his writings deserve to be placed among the greatest of historians of antiquity. And he actually became a Christian as a result of that. So we got this general reliability of the New Testament being verified by the work of Luke. And we see Jesus being considered something more than a prophet. He had a very high status. And he said things like, not one letter or stroke will pass away until all is accomplished. In other words, he verified the Old Testament to that time to be absolutely the Word of God. He spoke of it as the Word of God. So we start with the general reliability of the Scriptures. Then we go into Jesus being a man of great stature in that time, saying things like, this is the Word of God. And so that he referred to Adam and Eve as literal people. And so that gives me a standard by which I can reliably trust in the Scriptures. So
let me just finish with just a little simple point then. Are there any parts of the Bible that that's metaphorical or sort of, just to, like a story to illustrate a purpose?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
How do you tell which is which is fable from which is what you consider to be?
Okay, well, you would discern it just like you would with any other book. When you read the comic strips differently than you read the front page of the newspaper, because there's different genres. Now we have poetry in the Scriptures, we have didactic epistolary work, we have history in the work, and so you're going to read each one of those, understanding what it's. When David says, that he hides us under the shadow of his wings, it doesn't mean that God has a big feather wing. We know that he's speaking metaphorically about that and in his care for us.
What about Lot's wife then? She turns into a pillar of salt.
Well, that was history, and so yes, she actually turned into a pillar of salt when she looked back.
How do we know that happened?
Well, like I said, Jesus gave careful, or Luke gave careful analysis of Jesus, saying things like, "Not one jot or tittle shall pass away until all is accomplished."
But that was to reference to the law, though, wasn't it? I thought that was.
No, it was a whole Old Testament writings.
Right. So basically, Jesus said that happened. Jesus said that happened then.
Oh yeah, yeah. Right. You know, and everybody knew at that time that's what he was saying.
How do we know that Jesus was right? He might have been mistaken.
Well, that's true. I mean, that's something you can analyze and see, was Jesus a nut? Either he was a nut or...
well, not so much nut, just that the guy lived 2,000 years ago, if he lived at all. I don't know. I'm happy to accept that a man named Jesus existed.
Well, remember what I said, archaeologically, the Bible, I don't think there's never been any piece of archaeological evidence that has directly contradicted the Bible. Every turn...
I don't know. That may be true, that may not be true, I don't know.
Well, it hasn't. The Bible has always, we don't know a lot of things, but each day with each turn of the archaeologist's spade, we find that the Bible is more and more reliable as we're able to back it up. It's a historically accurate document, archaeologically speaking.
Do you believe in, do you accept archaeological science when it comes to fossils and the dating of, like fossils, fossils of dinosaurs and such?
Sure, I do. But here's the thing, Gene. This is probably the biggest barrier for me as being a biblical Christian, because I'm a young Earth creationist. The most difficult thing for me is elements within this universe which show signs of significant age. So that's my biggest hurdle that I've got to deal with. But my rationalization is that for me is that see, I'm gonna put my hand up against light. When God created Adam and Eve, did he create them as embryos, or did he create them as fully formed humans? When he made the garden, did it not have age? And when I say it wasn't built with age, was it made with maturity?
I would assume that in the story that the garden means a garden,
right?
With age, but I don't.
I don't like the word age. I like to say with maturity.
Well, you mean the trees had already matured?
Yeah, and Adam was a man. He wasn't an embryo.
Right. No, well that's the story, isn't it?
Yeah. So that's my justification for that. And that is the most daunting one for me, I think.
And you're happy to accept the aging of trees using rings and stuff like that?
Well, Jesus turned water into wine, did he not?
I don't believe he did, no.
Well, I'm just saying, from my perspective, I'm just saying.
Well, you believe that. I mean, I'm not sure. I don't see a reason to believe that is possible. We see nothing.
Gee, the only reason I believe the Bible is because of the miracles. Because if there are no miracles, then you have no way of verifying that person's message. That's what the purpose of miracles are.
Right.
So that's, a lot of people say, I can't believe the Bible because of all the miracles. I can't believe without it. That's the only reason I can say that. Ultimately, in Jesus rising from the dead, if he did not rise, I have no hope. I'm wasting my life.
So, in 2,000 years then, since the time of Jesus and all this, all the miracles that supposedly happened and the rising from the dead, we have seen nothing. There's been no prophets. There's been no miracles. Does that not trouble you? Do you not think that we should be seeing stuff like this?
No, not at all. In fact, I'm glad that we don't, because I believe that God can move providentially within our lives. We can pray and God will answer prayers, and I think that he does heal people if you can call to him, and he will. But we don't have miracle workers like that today. A lot of people pretend to be that way, but I don't believe that they're real. But I think that the purpose. I'm sorry?
I don't either.
Yeah, and so I think that the purpose of the miracle is to verify the message of the messenger. Now, once the canon of the scriptures is closed, we don't need those miracles anymore because God's word is to us. In Hebrews it says God has spoken many times in the past through his prophets, but today he has spoken to us through his son, and Jesus is the word of God. So we have the Bible to us to tell us a historical account of who he is and what he wants of us. Therefore, we don't.
Is he not to return? Is he not meant to return?
Christ?
Yes.
Oh, of course. Yes, that's what the Bible says, that he will return.
Well, that would be a miracle. That would be a miracle, wouldn't it?
No, but when I'm using a very specific, narrow description of the term miracle. So, for example, if I saw somebody, if God were to heal somebody, for example, before I became a Christian, I believe that God healed me of a desire for alcohol. All right, I could not stop, and I begged God, and I wasn't even a Christian at the time, but eventually I did become. I said, God, please help me with this, and He took away. I would not call that a miracle. I would call that, which I would be using Puritan language, it would be an extraordinary providence. You've got ordinary providences, which would be like doctors and aspirin. Those are ordinary providences that God's given. But an extraordinary providence is where God steps in specially. I don't call that a miracle, though, because I think miracles are, for the purpose of verifying the message of the messenger. So if you want to talk about, it's a semantic thing for me. I prefer to use a different word for that.
Okay. Interesting. Should we leave it there? You said you had to call it an end.
Yeah, I need to get on.
I'm happy to do that.
But I this is a much more stimulating conversation than I thought it would be. I thought you were some kid who didn't know what he's talking about. I thought, oh no, I don't. I've had a couple of those. It's like, oh. So that was very enjoyable getting to meet you and talk with you, G. It was very stimulating and challenging.
Thank you very much.
I enjoyed it.
Okay, well, it's my pleasure. Well, I'm sure we'll interact again.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. So anyway,
Okay.
all the best to you, and thank you for chatting with me.
Okay, cheers. Thank you.
Okay, we'll see you.
Okay, bye.